Welcome to the Aging Boomers. I'm your host, Frank Sampson, and on this show we discuss so many of the issues facing boomers, their parents, and what we know, of course, is an aging population. And I just, again, want to continue to thank everybody for all their support. So many of you gone on to iTunes or iHeartRadio or downloaded our free app on your iPhone or Android phone. If you haven't, just go on there, type in Aging Boomers, and download it, and you'll get updated on the podcast, which we're doing each Monday and Friday. So I want to let everybody know that today's show is sponsored by Senior Care Authority. Senior Care Authority is a professional senior placement and elder care management organization that has a national network of professionals to help in determining the right path for seniors in receiving proper care or supervision. So whether it's in-home care, assisted living, residential, or memory care, you can talk and meet with a senior care advisor right in your area. Just call 888-809-1231 or go to www.seniorcareauthority.com. And, of course, I'm very excited about today's guests. Dr. Power, Dr. G. Allen Power, was on our show. It's been over a year now, and we're thrilled to have him back talking about his new book as well. Dr. Power is a board-certified internist and geriatrician, clinical associate professor of medicine at the University of Rochester, and a fellow of the American College of Physicians and American Society for Internal Medicine. Dr. Power is a certified Eden Alternative educator, a member of the Eden Alternative Board of Directors, and an international educator on transformational models of care for older adults, particularly those living with changing cognitive abilities. Dr. Power's new book, Dementia Beyond Disease, Enhancing Well-Being, was released just this past June by Health Professions Press. His debut book, Dementia Beyond Drugs, Changing the Culture of Care, was a 2010 Book of the Year award from the American Journal of Nursing, a Merit Award from the 2011 National Mature Media Awards, and was listed as a must-have title in Duty's Core Titles list for 2013. He has co-produced 2 DVDs with Dr. Richard Taylor and Brilliant Image Productions, Living with Dementia and 20 Questions, 100 Answers, 6 Perspectives. Dr. Power has been named one of 2013's 5 Leaders of Tomorrow by Long-Term Living magazine. Dr. Power, we're thrilled to have you back on the Aging Boomers. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Frank. It's great to talk to you again.
Yeah, and lots happened with us. I spoke to you just before we got on the air with our expansion of our podcast, but it's nothing compared to what has been going on with you. Why don't you update us? Since I think we had you on, February 2013, a little over a year ago, and talked about your book. Yeah. And so tell us what's been going on.
Well, since then, that's really just about the time I was starting to work on my new book. So that presaged my first trip to Australia and New Zealand, where I was doing some teaching down there. I have since done training seminars in UK and additional ones in Denmark and Canada, and traveling around the U.S. and as we mentioned, heading out to South Africa in about a week to do some sessions and attend a conference in Cape Town. So it's been kind of an exciting whirlwind of activities.
Yeah, well, that's great, and congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Previously, your previous book won all sorts of awards, and it's called Dementia Beyond Drugs, which we've gotten a lot of comments on that interview we did. A lot of great comments. And so what it led you to explore, or what led you to your most recent book? Like you said, it was about that time you started writing Dementia Beyond Disease. And tell us a little bit more about that and how it kind of compares to your previous book.
Okay. Well, the new book, Dementia Beyond Disease, is a true sequel to the first book. I didn't, unlike a lot of these, publishing gurus, I didn't sell a new book with the same old material in it. At least I don't think I did. But Dementia Beyond Drugs really came out to challenge the issue of overuse of antipsychotics and other psychiatric medications in people with dementia. That, as you say, came out a few years ago. And in that book, I not only challenged the use of these drugs, but talked a lot about how we can transform the care environment for people with dementia, and a lot of ways that we could find different ways to understand what they're trying to communicate, what might be a cause of distress, different ways to respond. And that certainly got me a lot of notice, and I was able to generate some teaching seminars based on the material in that book. And as I taught the seminars, that really helped me evolve my thinking, because I saw which concepts people were able to grab and which ones they kind of struggled with. And so I struggled with better ways to teach them about that. And I found that I still was looking for more of a strength-based approach to people living with dementia. And in the first book, I very briefly mentioned this idea of, what is our ultimate goal for people? Is it really simply to reduce medications or to reduce the stress? And I really thought, no, there's got to be something deeper. There's got to be things that you can still have, even if you live with an incurable disease like Alzheimer's. And I did mention briefly in that book this concept of well-being, and one particular model of well-being that came from a group of authors that were sponsored by a grant by Eden Alternative several years ago. And they talked about 7 domains of well-being that they felt went beyond the usual medical measurements that we use, and were attainable by all people, and were desirable by all people, regardless of age or culture or ability. And those domains are identity, connectedness, security, autonomy, meaning, growth, and joy. Now, I just listed them in a slightly different order than the original paper because I teach them in a particular order for a reason. But I went back to that and I thought, this is really a strength-based approach. These are things that everybody needs, everybody has some of, but you tend to lose some of this when you live with dementia, both because of the illness, the changes in the brain, but also because of the way we see people and care for them often, which can cause excess disability. And so how can I build a book around those 7 domains of well-being? And so that's really what I did, and that's where the subtitle of the book comes from. So there are some introductory chapters and some closing chapters, but the 7 central chapters have one for each of those domains of well-being, and they look at dementia, both how it's challenged, how it affects people in different living environments, and then at the end of each chapter, ways that we can restore those aspects of well-being through transformational approaches to care. And then I also use each chapter for departures to talk about one issue or another as it seems to fit the theme. So, for instance, under connectedness, I talk about using dedicated staffing assignments in long-term care, and I talk about things like sexuality and intimacy. Under security, I talk about things like the use of alarms and how they may actually cause more distress than they help, and sort of going through various topics as the spirit leads, in addition to the main core material. So that's basically the outline. And I thought it would be a nice little addendum to my first book, but the truth is, once I started looking through the lens of these well-being domains, the ideas just kind of exploded, and this book turned out being about 40 pages longer than the first book did.
Wow. Yeah. So I know in the book you write about drug-based interventions, and how they really have failed to acknowledge the humanity of people with dementia. But you also say that there's holistic approaches out there that where dementia care also falls short. So can you comment on that as well?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And the nice thing about this framework of using these well-being domains is that I think the vast majority of people agree that these are important things for all of us, and that we should strive for these. And so it gives us kind of a higher goal to reach for, and sort of a code of ethics. And so I found with this book it was much easier for me to be, even in some ways, in a respectful way, much more critical of a lot of things we do, because it's not about me or you or who's right or who's wrong, but it's about, if we believe in these domains of well-being, do our practices really uphold these? And what I found, and this once again comes from my own history and my own shortcomings in trying to teach about these ideas that we call non-pharmacological interventions and ways of avoiding drugs, is that they really are still use that kind of biomedical mindset to look at the person. They're very short-term interventions. They tend to be reactive instead of proactive. So if somebody's distressed, you do something, you calm them down, but that doesn't get at the real cause. So the next day they're going to be distressed again. We even treat them like doses of pills sometimes, like folding laundry once a day or something like that. And we don't really seek to understand the person, her history, the surrounding attributes of the living environment or the operations of the day that may or may not affect the person. And so we're still giving short-term relief, but not getting into the real reason. And so there's no long-term sustainability. And my concern is that as particularly nursing homes are being pressed to reduce their antipsychotics, many of these people got these pills because they had very real distress in the first place. And if you take these sedating drugs away and don't come up with a better approach and people get distressed again, then eventually all your gains with reducing drugs are going to be lost because you're going to start putting them back again. And so I needed to find something that would give people, would really treat or supply the underlying loss of well-being that I believe fuels a lot of this distress, rather than just responding in the moment for temporary calm.
That's a very good point. As it relates to the, let's just talk about family caregivers. I'm sure we have many of them out there listening to the show, and where they're being told by their doctor or suggested by the doctor to provide their loved one with certain drugs, somebody that may have been diagnosed with some form of dementia. And then, they're listening to this or have read your book. I mean, they're probably in this conundrum. What do I do? Do I go this way? Do I go that way? Do I listen to my doctor or what? I mean, what do you suggest to those to the people, and so many of them out there, I'm sure, that are in that type of situation?
Absolutely, Frank, and there are a few interesting points in your question. So I just want to point up a couple of things you said. One thing that I think people do not recognize, whether they be family members or professionals, is that right now nursing homes are under the gun for overusing antipsychotic pills. But this is not a nursing home problem. The reason they're under the gun is because we have the tools to measure the amount of use in nursing homes. We don't have those tools in the community because these drugs are not FDA approved for use in dementia, and so no one counts them. But the very few research studies we have suggest that there are probably many, many more people taking antipsychotic drugs in their own home compared to in nursing homes. So this is really a societal problem. It's not just a nursing home problem. And I think particularly doctors in the community and other people think it's not my problem, it's those nursing homes. But it really does exist everywhere. So I did want to start with that. But once again, the thing about my book that is really kind of unusual is it really says that this need for well-being underlies a lot of what's going on, and that if we can work to restore those aspects of well-being for people, we can really create new lives and new hope for people who are living with one of America's most dreaded illnesses. And a lot of it really begins with how the family member sees the person, how they see their role. The overriding stigmas in society of dementia being the long goodbye and people fading away and the person not being there are extremely harmful. They're harmful to the person by dehumanizing them and by disempowering them in daily life, but they're also harmful to the family members who are in a constant state of grief and overburdened by feeling they have to do everything for two people. And so it's really a harmful social construct around a very real medical problem. And so one of the first things I do in both books is really try to shift people's perspective about the person who continues to be whole in spite of their cognitive changing ability, and really look at this as more of a disability model than a medical illness model, which helps us understand that the person hasn't gone anywhere, that they have some different abilities, and that we need to find ways to support them. Just like you'd use a wheelchair ramp for somebody who can no longer walk, you need to use brain ramps to help people continue to connect and engage whose perspectives are changing.
That's a good analogy. Great analogy. So do you think most people just really don't have or have a misunderstanding about dementia and Alzheimer's? And I'm talking even within the medical field, even those that are involved in long-term care. Hate to put you on the spot there.
I don't want to discount all the research and all the things that are out there, but I think what people have is what I would call an overly narrow understanding. It really is an extreme biomedical focus. And there certainly are neurological things going on. I'm not saying that nothing's happening in the brain of the person with dementia, but our model focuses intensely on disease, deficits, decline. And when you only see that half of the equation, it leads you to certain practices that actually not only make things worse for the person, but blind you to finding innovative solutions, because you don't see the other side of the coin. And I found that since I've brought this, in a way more holistic approach, it really has brought to me solutions that I'd never seen before when I just followed that same narrow paradigm. So it's not so much about medicine being wrong, but just opening our minds that what they're seeing is only one small part of the puzzle.
Got it. I know in your book you highlighted a number of examples, true stories that demonstrate the power of well-being approach to greatly improve the lives of people with dementia. Is there any that just come to mind? Obviously, you don't have to mention names, but just any that
sure.
come to mind that you can talk about?
One favorite story I tell that I think could be useful also to the family members or other professional care partners that might be listening in is something I've learned about communication. Now, I just talked about building cognitive ramps for people, like a wheelchair ramp, and this is something I've learned really from people like Richard Taylor or Christine Bryden, another person living with dementia who's been an international advocate. And the one thing I've learned from them is that as people live with dementia, they often process the world less through memories and facts, because those are less accessible, and more on the level of emotions or symbolism, because that is a more durable way that they can relate to the world. And one of the big communication problems we have is that we continue to look through our eyes and see facts and logic. And so, for instance, if someone says, a 90-year-old woman says, "I'm looking for my mother," we get stuck in this paradigm of, okay, do we either tell the truth, your mother's been dead for years, and risk the person being upset, or do we tell the little lie, your mother's at the store and we'll be back in an hour, and then risk, losing all trust when it doesn't come true and the person remembers we said that. And the truth is, you don't have to do either one. What you need to do is understand that the person is not speaking so much from a factual place as a symbolic place. And really the key is to validate the person's feelings, validate their sense of loss or displacement, and to explore, her relationship with her mother, find out what her mother means to her, what she gets from her mother, and see how that relates to what aspects of well-being might be missing in her environment. And I was telling the story up in Alaska, and a woman came to me after the talk and the dinner we had and told me that it had really helped her solve a challenge she had with her mother, who had moved into this assisted living home. And she'd only been there a few weeks, but was very forgetful, and every time her daughter came to see her in the evening and tried to leave and said goodnight, her mother would get concerned and asked her, "Where are you going to sleep?" And her daughter would answer in the way we probably would, "Well, I'm going home. I'm going to sleep in my own bed, of course." And when she mentioned home, her mother would get upset, and she'd start missing her home and her husband, and the tears would flow. And it got to the point where her daughter was going to cut down her visits because she just couldn't deal with this trauma every night when she tried to leave. And so she listened to this point, and she thought to herself, okay, well, I've been answering the words of the question, where are you going to sleep, in my own way, but what's the symbolism? What is she really asking me? And she realized, well, this woman is still my mother, and she still cares about my safety and happiness and well-being. That's what she's checking on. And so when she took her back to her room that night and said good night, and her mother said, where are you going to sleep? She said, Mom, I've got the best place to sleep tonight. I've got a good books in the library, and I'm going to make a cup of tea and curl up on a big bed and have a wonderful night. And her mother smiled and said good night, and she walked out the door. So once again, by understanding the perspective of the person and seeing more than just, confusion or inability to learn, you really can come up with some new ideas that can be very successful.
It's just a massive education process.
It is, and it's both it's education and de-education. We kind of have to unlearn some of the things we've been taught, the stigmatized ideas that he does that because he has a brain disease, instead of maybe he does that because of the way we're caring for him, or because there's something missing that we're not supplying. But also then re-educating. What are the new ways, the new tools, new ways of understanding? So it is really huge. And to that point, I just got back yesterday from a big grant in Mississippi, where the federal government used some of their monetary penalties from nursing home surveys to support a 2-day course I wrote for Eden Alternative, and I taught it to close to 600 people around the state of Mississippi. And we had 3 classes. Each one had between 140 and well over 200 people, and they had people from all areas of the nursing homes, many nursing assistants, as well as other nurses, administrators, whoever. But also every surveyor in the state came to one of these, and many of the ombudsmen came as well. Mm-hmm. And so it was really this wonderful groupings of both providers and regulators working together to learn new approaches. And they were, from what I can tell, hugely successful, and people were very thrilled about it. So we've been doing a few of these big state grants and going around doing these seminars, and it's been quite helpful, at least in long-term living situations.
That's great. So we have just a few minutes left, so maybe you can give a quick overview, or not necessarily you gave the overview on the book, but if somebody listening hasn't read either book, do you recommend one before the other now? And so any suggestions you have to our listeners, and also go ahead and tell people how they can get the book and how they could learn more about everything that you're doing as well.
Absolutely. I call the second book a sequel to the first because it represents an evolution of my thinking, and I don't repeat myself. And there are a couple places where I say, if you want to hear more about why I don't like the drugs, go back and read chapter 2 of the first book, things like that, so I'm not repeating myself too much. But they are a little different, and I don't think that you absolutely have to read the first book before you can read the second one. One of the things with the first book is that it came from my nursing home experience. I've been working many years full-time in the nursing home. It was very much a critique of the use of medications. Most of my stories came from the nursing home, and even though I thought the lessons were very universal, a lot of people saw it as a book that was more for nursing homes, didn't apply as much to community-based living. And so for those people who found those lessons a little bit hard to translate, I would say the second book was much more intentional at trying to keep a lot of examples around the community and around home-based care too. So that in some ways family members might find the second book a little bit more user-friendly there, just because the examples are maybe a little closer to home than the other one. I think the first book talks a lot about ways to respond to the stress. So in the moment, there's a lot of good advice for that. The second book talks about a lot of ways to proactively build well-being. So in addition to responding for the moment, you also have to be doing something in the background to help the person not get distressed in the future. And so I think they kind of go hand in hand and complement each other that way. As far as getting the books, they're both, as you said, published by Health Professions Press, and they have a website, healthpropress.com, healthpropress.com, where both books are for sale, as well as the videos you mentioned. And also you can get both of the books on Amazon and probably some of the other online booksellers. But I know for a fact that both books are available through that. So those are probably the easiest ways for people to get a hold of them.
Great.
And they are now finally in ebook format too. The publishers moved into that area. So those who would prefer an ebook, that's available.
Good. And I know you're not only just traveling around the country, but around the world. If people wanted to kind of see where you're going to be and may want to hear you speak, how would they go about doing that?
Well, I have a website, and I try my best to keep my travels up to date. It's mostly up to date, although it needs a few extras. But the website is alpower.net, so ALPOWER.net, and on that there's a schedule page. It's actually a dual page because I play some music on the side, so there's a medical half and a music half. But if you go to the medical half, the geriatrician side, you'll see a schedule link, and it tells you where I've been and where I'm going to be for 2014 and into 2015 as well.
Dr. Al Power, thank you so much for joining us again. You got to go out and get his new book, Dementia Beyond Disease. If you haven't read his first one, Dementia Beyond Drugs, get that one too. A lot of great information, and congratulations on all your success, and thank you for all you do. Appreciate
and thank you, Frank. Great talking to you, and congratulations on your podcast. It's really great.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for joining us. Again, download the free app, or go on to agingboomers.com, iHeartRadio, iTunes, all different ways to get the information. Thanks for all your support. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Bye-bye.